The undercroft of Orvith runs 40 meters below the city's main transit floor, a pressurized maintenance corridor that follows the old pipeline routes, lit by yellow service strips and smelling, always, of coolant and old concrete. The transit authority calls it level sub-4. The workers who run it call it the Hollow. I had been its sole registered technician for 6 years before she arrived, and in that time I had learned to read the Hollow the way a man reads a face. The hiss of a failing seal, the low resonance of a cracked junction plate, the particular silences that meant nothing was wrong. Which is why I heard her. She came in through the service access on the east side, the one that opens off Corridor 12 into a maintenance alcove large enough to store a replacement conduit drum and not much else. It was the 3rd hour of the night cycle. I was logging a coolant variance 2 junctions down. I heard the door, and I did what any technician does in a sealed corridor when a door opens unexpectedly. I went still and I listened. She was careful. Most people who use service doors when they shouldn't are not careful. She held the door until the seal clicked rather than letting it clang, and she stood in the alcove for a full minute without moving, reading the space the same way I read it. That told me something. Then she moved toward the far wall and sat down against it, and I heard her breathing slow from something desperate into something that was only exhausted. I knew who she was. The Sovereignty's broadcast had run for 2 days after the coup, the Queen's image on every channel, the Chancellor's house marking the frame in red, the word traitor in the official script beneath her name. I had looked at that image the same way I look at most political broadcasts, long enough to know what I needed to know, then I moved on to the work in front of me. But I knew her face, and the woman who had just sat down against the wall of my alcove had that face, thinned by days I did not want to imagine, wearing a maintenance worker's borrowed coverall 3 sizes too large, with nothing in her hands. I finished my log entry. I went to the supply cabinet at Junction 7, took out the ration pack I kept as a backup for long shifts, and I walked back to the east alcove. I set the pack on the floor inside the door, along with the spare insulated blanket from the cabinet beside it. I left the service light on its lowest setting. I did not knock. I did not announce myself. I went back to my work. That was the first night. I made a vow somewhere in the 2nd week. Not out loud, not to anyone, just to myself, in the particular way a person makes a binding decision alone in a quiet corridor at 3 in the morning when the work is done, and the choice is simply there in front of him. The vow was this: I would not tell. Whatever she was to the Sovereignty, whatever the politics overhead were doing, she had come into my corridor with nothing, and I was not going to hand her back to the people who had made her run. What became complicated was the logistics. The supply logs from those 3 years would tell a patient reader a great deal. I kept the entries technically accurate, every item logged against a legitimate maintenance code, every gram of food requisitioned under a plausible heading. Additional thermal insulation, logged against a coolant variance that genuinely existed. Nutritional supplement packs, logged against the health and safety requirement for single-operator confined space work. Water filtration units, logged against a genuine upgrade I completed 3 months early. The work was real. The headings were just broader than they needed to be. I am not a political person. I do not have strong feelings about succession crises or regency clauses. I am a tunnel technician, but I know what it looks like when something living is trying to keep itself alive in a space that was not designed for it. And I know the difference between a thing that deserves to survive and a thing that doesn't. She was quiet. She was careful. She caused no damage to the corridor and asked for nothing I had not already left beside the door. In 3 years, she never spoke to me before I spoke to her. And when I did, she answered in the plain way of someone who has learned not to waste words on decoration. I don't know exactly when she started leaving things in return. Small carvings, she must have had a blade, and the Hollow's maintenance supply includes scoring tools she could have borrowed and replaced without my noticing. Tiny things. A seal junction reproduced in compressed insulation foam, detailed enough that I could have used it as a reference model. a conduit coupling, accurate to the millimeter. Once a figure that I thought at first was abstract, 2 lines, recursive, one folding back into the other, and then realized was a map of the East Corridor as seen from the alcove. My own territory, drawn from her vantage point. I kept them in the supply cabinet at Junction 7. The Loyalists came on a morning I was running a routine junction audit 3 levels east. I heard the boots first, too many of them, too coordinated for transit workers, and I came back to find 4 people in the East Access approach. The one in Chancellor's House livery had a data tablet and was reading from it with the focused expression of someone who has found what they were looking for. "These supply logs," she said when she saw me, not a question. She turned the tablet so I could see it. 3 years of maintenance entries. The requisition patterns are unusual. Single-operator confined space work has a specific safety requirement, I said. I follow it. The quantities exceed the requirement. The requirement is a minimum. It doesn't cap the maximum. She looked at me. Then, we are not the Chancellor's House. I had already assessed that. The livery was Chancellor's House cut, but 2 administrations old. The 3 in plainclothes were carrying themselves with the particular wariness of people who had spent time hiding. "No," I said, "you're not. We've been looking for her for 14 months. The logs led us here. Is she?" "She is fine," I said. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. One of the plainclothes men put a hand briefly to the wall, as if he needed the contact. I took them to the east alcove. She was standing when we came in. She had heard the boots too, and she had the stillness of someone prepared for outcomes in either direction. When she saw the woman in the old livery, something happened to her face that I had not seen in 3 years. Not the careful composure I had come to know, but something underneath it, older and more unguarded, the expression of a person recognizing that they are, after a long time, allowed to stop. There was a great deal that followed that I was peripheral to. The woman in livery was the Chancellor of the Loyalist Remnant, a title theoretical for 3 years and now, abruptly, operational again. There were documents and plans I did not ask to be briefed on. At some point, the Loyalist Chancellor stepped out to begin communicating with whatever network was waiting, and the Queen and I were briefly alone. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "Why did you not tell anyone?" "I made a vow," I said. "To whom?" "To myself. In the 2nd week, I decided I wouldn't tell." She was quiet. Then she reached into the collar of the coverall and drew out a cord I had not noticed before. On it was a small carved piece of insulation foam. I recognized it immediately, not one of the figures she had left in the cabinet. Smaller, simpler, the shape of a ration pack, worn smooth along one edge from 3 years of handling. The first one, the one I had set on the floor inside the door on the first night. She had kept it, for 3 years, close enough to touch. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, which seemed correct. The corridor hummed around us, the seal on Junction 9 doing its slow, familiar work, the pressure systems running their cycles, all the quiet industry of a space that does not care about succession crises or the distance between what a person is and what a person has been forced to become. "Thank you," she said. "The seal on Junction 9 is going to need replacing in about 6 weeks, I said. "I'll put in the requisition." She almost smiled. It was the first time I had seen that. I went back to work.